In the next edition of It's About Money, my guest will be RC Glen. She is the president and co-founder of iGoals Coaching. Stay tuned for the next edition of It's About Money. Hello and welcome to It's About Money. I'm Nannete Nocon and thank you for joining us. I'm delighted to introduce our guest for this show, and that is RC Glen, who is a success coach, president and co-founder of iGoals Coaching. Thank you for being here.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
So RC, what does a coach do? I mean, we know about a coach in a sports team, but
Sure.
What does a coach do?
Yeah. I think the easiest thing to do is to talk a little bit about what a coach is not.
Okay.
Because a common misperception is that a coach is either some kind of consultant or some kind of therapist. And a consultant does things for you, and a therapist sits with you while you sort of backtrack and try to figure out the roots of your problems in order to move forward. A coach sits in a middle ground. So sometimes, yes, you wear a little bit of a consultant hat. Sometimes leans a little bit towards therapy, but it is neither of those. It's about working with somebody to clarify their goals and to figure out what the solutions are. So the really important distinction is that it's a solution-based approach, that you always want to be tackling whatever the client wishes to achieve and figuring out how to move forward. It's always about forward movement.
I see. Great. That's wonderful. Now, why would someone who's successful and is already moving forward want to work with a coach?
Sure. That's a great question. And I get asked that a lot. You know, the easiest way to think about it is, as you said, we're familiar with athletes who have coaches. We also know entertainers have coaches, actors, singers, and even top executives have coaches. I think a lot of people are familiar with the fact that the chairman of Google has a coach. Mm-hmm. But if you think about an athlete, and an example I like to use is Nolan Ryan, who is the greatest strikeout pitcher in the history of baseball. And that's not an opinion, that's a statistical fact. Mm-hmm. And the second place record holder isn't even close to Nolan Ryan. And Nolan Ryan, throughout his entire career, had a pitching coach. Now, why would the greatest strikeout pitcher in the history of baseball need a pitching coach? It's because if Nolan Ryan was pitching a game and say he became tired, the pitching coach was there watching him and was saying things to him from the sidelines like, "Nolan, I can see you're getting tired. You're not extending your arm enough." It's an outside perspective. And you can take that analogy and you can directly transfer it to somebody who's working through goals. Having a coach is somebody who gets to know you. It's a relationship of trust that builds up, and it's somebody who understands how you work and is an outside pair of eyes, because nobody ever sees themselves as others see them. Mm-hmm. So to have somebody outside noticing things and saying, you know, you just did this when we know that it's that works for you, and so let's just shift your behavior just a little bit, is incredibly powerful.
Yeah, that's amazing. You're absolutely right. We don't know what we don't know. So we need help from someone who can tell us that.
Yes.
Yeah, that's great. Now, often people equate success with money. When someone's said to be successful, there's a money component of it. But it's really not the definition of success, right?
It's one definition. Mm-hmm. I think that success is an incredibly flexible term, and it's also a very personal term. What is success to you might not be success to me. But unfortunately, we've sort of been mired in this cultural definition that has been foisted on us by our society at large, and it's this sense that being rich and often famous equals success. Mm-hmm. And yet, how many examples can we all point to of people who are rich or famous who aren't happy? And ultimately, I think that success, whatever it means to an individual person, it's the sense of being fulfilled and satisfied and ultimately happy. So what makes somebody happy? Is it going to be money? Well, maybe it is. Mm-hmm. And the person that comes to mind for me with money making them happy is Warren Buffett. Now, we know he's a remarkable man. And I have heard that he considers money to be simply widgets. And what he's interested in is the science of making it grow. Mm-hmm. That's completely different than somebody who's trying to amass money for the sake of it, for what it can buy them. So I think we need to take a step back from the very narrow definition and ask ourselves, what exactly would make me happy, would make me fulfilled? And I like to talk about it as having a life of meaning. And another term that I use a lot is authentic success, because success that is simply living up to standards that have been imposed externally isn't real success. Whereas authentic success, it comes from the inside.
And something that you've thought about and defined as being part of you, or needing to be a part of you.
And growing from your own personal values. That's incredibly important, that your personal values, and I know that is something that's near and dear to your heart, is it's really important. And so often I'm surprised sometimes working with clients that they haven't really sat down and said, what matters to me? They're and there's, when I ask them to go through the exercise, which is something I always do at the very beginning of working with somebody, some people realize they've never actually taken the time to sit down and think about what matters just to them. What gives their life meaning? What do they value? What could they not imagine life without? Because so much of it has come from what other people tell them. You should be doing this. You should be doing that. Oh, it's successful to be a doctor or a lawyer. I know a surgeon whose parents told him they had a history of doctors in their family. And he wanted to be a historian. And this was unacceptable to them. Now, he conceded to their wishes, and he went to medical school. He's Scottish, and he qualified with the Royal College of Surgeons and became a surgeon. And I met him later in his life, and he confided in me that he had been unhappy his entire life because it didn't matter to him, his medical training. What really mattered was that he had wanted to be a historian, and he thought he could have made some kind of contribution that way. So it's tragic when you hear about stories where people didn't get in touch with their own values, or maybe even knew what their values were, but nevertheless didn't listen to what came from their heart.
Sure, because I guess if you don't know that, the questions you ask yourself on a daily basis is something entirely different. How to fulfill other people's objectives instead of asking yourself in your mind, what can I do today to meet my objectives? You know? So that's interesting. Thank you. Now, you are also a life strategist coach and student coach.
Yes.
What does that mean? You're a success coach first and foremost, but what do those designations mean, and what?
Well, we use the terminology success coach because it's a broader term. I like it. Most people are familiar with life coaching. And I like the term success coach because we work with people who are already successful and just help them to move it up a few notches, or, you know, the sky's the limit, however far they want to go. And when I say we work with successful people, again, success is a personal term, but I think that everybody is successful at something. They may not consider themselves successful. Maybe they need to look within or examine their life, talk it through with somebody else to figure out in what way they're successful. But everybody has things that they're good at, and everybody has things that matter to them. And so it's a question of taking that little spark that's there and fanning it and building it into something huge. So we like to say at iGoals that we take you from successful to phenomenal.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's really great. Now, your company name is iGoals, iGoals with a Z at the end instead of an S. How did that name, iGoals Coaching, how did that name come about?
Well, I'd like to take credit for it myself, but I'm going to have to give my son credit. We talked about it when we were first getting going, and we knew mainly our business is on by internet. We have a website, and the coaching that we do is by telephone, so we can work with people anywhere in the world. So the I was for that, to indicate that it is very much an internet-based business. And the Z was a nod to something that we have called the Plan Z Success System. So it was just a little spin on that.
I see. So tell me about that. What is the Plan Z success system?
Yes. Plan Z success system is our success system. Now, many coaches have their own success systems. I'm sure that you've run into that. Pretty much anybody that's walked through a bookstore has seen them screaming out at them from the bookshelves. But many years ago, when my husband and I were both reaching for some rather improbable dreams ourselves, and so we started studying successful people and trying to figure out what have they done in order to achieve their goals. Mm-hmm. And what we found was that there were all these systems out there, and on one hand you had systems that were incredibly vague, that would simply say, oh yeah, your goals have to meet these qualifications, and now you're on your own. And then on the other hand, there were ones that were so incredibly complex that I found that I was overwhelmed before I even got started, because it was like, oh, I have to memorize these 10 different principles, and then I have to apply every single one of them, and then they want me to sit down and brainstorm 100 different goals, and that, I'm never going to get anywhere if I have to do this. So we did a lot of research, and we decided that what we needed to do was figure out what are the essential steps that somebody really needs to go through. And we used successful people as an example. Another thing we used as an example was a study that was done at Dominican University. That was a very, very interesting study. It took 150 people from 7 different countries, all different walks of life: education, business, finance, government, healthcare. And the criteria for being in the study was that you had to actively have goals. Mm-hmm. Then the people were divided according to the way they were treating their goals. At the very, let's say, bottom of the scale were people who simply had goals. If you asked them, what is your goal, they could tell you what it was. Mm-hmm. The next group of people had the goals and they had written them down. Mm-hmm. So this is an important distinction to write them down.
Yes. Uh-huh.
The next group of people had the goals, they'd written them down, and on top of that they had an action plan. Mm-hmm. The last group had all of this, and on top of that they had a system where they were reporting on a weekly basis to another person, mm-hmm. a coach. Mm-hmm. And what they found was the final group that reported on a weekly basis to somebody else who was trained to help them had a 75% higher success rate than the other groups.
So they're accountable to someone else besides themselves.
It's the accountability, and in fact we like to call that the success tipping point. The fact that you can have all these other things, you can be well-intentioned, it's the very rare person that can push through completely alone. And sometimes all somebody needs is a family member who's supportive and is willing to check in on them. But those relationships aren't always conducive to holding somebody accountable. We like to say holding your feet to the fire. Sure. Maybe it's a contentious, can get to be a contentious relationship. You don't want anybody who's doing any finger pointing. And a coach is trained to not only help you move forward, but also to help you evaluate what you've done. One of the things that I say every week to all my clients is, let's take a look at what's working and what's not. Mm-hmm. And we always do more of what's working and less of what isn't.
Oh, great. So the focus is more on how you can, on the success.
Absolutely. Learn from what hasn't worked, and I don't use the word failure. Mm-hmm. Because there is no such thing as failure as far as I'm concerned. It's simply that you're learning what didn't work. Sure. And I've borrowed that from Thomas Edison. Said that he, in discovering the light bulb, he didn't have failures. He simply had a lot of experiments where he learned what wasn't going to work.
That's fascinating. And that's really the best way to look at it, because why beat yourself up with things that didn't work, but really capitalize on it by taking what had worked from it. That's great. That's brilliant. So, what makes then, I mean, you've said that there's many different ways that people present, or coaches present the way, their model in terms of working with clients. What makes your system different, the Plan Z success system different?
I think its simplicity is really the key factor. There's the accountability, obviously. I mean, we're coaches, so you can use our Plan Z system by yourself. My husband is actually, he's my business partner. He's also a coach, and he's actually in the process of writing the book of Plan Z. So it is something that's available to people to use on their own, but we like to think of the concept of having a coach as the success tipping point because of the study that I referred to, where people are so much more successful when they have that. But the big thing with Plan Z is its simplicity. We boiled it down to 3 key phases, which is organize, prioritize, and realize. And you'll hear lots of Z's in there, and that's again where the Z comes back in for Plan Z and for I goals. It's all ties together.
So let's repeat that. So it's organize,
prioritize, realize.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. We'll take a quick break.
Okay.
We'll be right back.
Let's not forget America's veterans. Log on to thankyouveterans.org and write a note of thanks to someone who served our country. A public service of Paralyzed Veterans of America.
And we're back. I'm Nannete Nocon. It's About Money, and my guest is R.C. Glen. She's the president and co-founder of iGoals Coaching. R.C., thanks again for being here. Now, I like your business philosophy of taking someone from successful to phenomenal. I think that's brilliant. Does this limit the audience for the Plan Z success system?
No, not at all, because as I said earlier, everybody has something they're successful in. So I don't think it's limiting at all. I'd like to see everybody using it, truthfully. I think there are so many people who feel that maybe what they're reaching for is out of reach, and so they get discouraged. And an important thing about Plan Z is that we help people to take their goals. We do talk about what's realistic. I mean, it is important that a goal is realistic. But then at the same time, to borrow a term from Jack Welch, you have to have stretch goals. Stretch goals are goals that push you enough that it will be a challenge and you'll respond to that challenge, without being so simple that you'll just think, it's so easy, I'm not going to try. Because most people who are striving to achieve goals are motivated people, and they enjoy a challenge.
Now, I love the way your website describes you. A fast reader, slow writer, good listener, lifelong learner, literature PhD, passionate about being a student success coach, consultant, wife, mother, humanist, pacifist, vegetarian, meditator, and motivator. I thought that was really wonderful. Now, so it's obvious that you love life and you love what you do. What aspects of your work do you enjoy the most?
Oh my goodness. I feel really lucky. It's such a good feeling to help people to reach for something that they dreamed of doing and watch them do it. It's a great feeling to help instill that confidence in them. That's something else that coaching tends to do, is bolster people's confidence. And you might think, well, why would confidence be an issue if you're successful at something, you're confident? But that's not always the case. There are people who are very, very good at things, who have achieved many, many things, and yet still have an underlying sense of a lack of confidence underneath. So I love seeing somebody sort of blossom. It just feels good to be a part of that, and to know at the end of the day that the contribution that I've made has made somebody else feel better, and to hope that that's expanding outwards, that they go away feeling great, and then they treat the people around themselves well, and it just works outwards. You know, it's like throwing a little stone in a pond. I work with graduate students as well as college students, and in particular PhD students. And I have a student that that I'm working with. She's writing her dissertation, and we had our weekly meeting, and she was having a particularly difficult time with something, and it's very, very difficult to be in that period where you're writing a dissertation. And I happened to have a cancellation right after her appointment. And so I just went right on through the next appointment and ended up spending 2 hours on the phone with her. Now, I don't always do that. I mean, I can't do that. I'm tightly scheduled. But I was able to do that, and I felt that she needed it. And we managed to break through the stumbling block that she was having. And later that evening, I checked my email, and there was the loveliest thank you note from her saying how much that had meant to her. That's what I love about what I do. I felt so fabulous. I went to bed with a huge smile on my face because I had made such a difference in someone else's life.
Sure. Because effectively as a coach, you've empowered someone to help get over that stumbling block and realize, or move towards realizing their
and there are too often, there are people who are so happy to be naysayers, and I don't understand why, but it is something that I experienced. I went to college at an older age, and because I was not traditional age, I found that there were a lot of people who had difficulty accepting the fact that I said, you know, I want to do this, I want to go through and get this degree. I knew that I had wanted to go on and get my PhD, and I was already in my 30s. I was a wife and a mother and a homeowner, and people said, well, you can't do that. That was very, very difficult. And the main thing they would say to me is, you can't do that because you're too old.
Yeah. Oh boy.
I know. Yikes. What am I now then? And you know what? My husband used to say to me, well, if you don't do it now, because at that time what I was planning to do was going to take 4 years. And they said, you're too old to do that. And he would say to me, well, what will you be in 4 years if you don't do it? And I thought that was a wonderful way of putting it, because you're right. If you don't go after your dream now, if somebody's coming up with some reason to squash it, you have to look and think, well, what will I have in, you know, X period of time if I don't go after it now? Well, you'll be just as dissatisfied and unfulfilled, and you'll look back and say, if only I'd started this 4 years ago.
Right, and the 4 years became elusive because it just kept
exactly, exactly.
That's great. Yeah, I think sometimes people are naysayers because it's a habit. And some people have told me that, well, you know, I just don't want you to feel discouraged. Well, you're actually doing that to me right now.
Exactly, exactly, yeah.
Yeah, I can understand. Now, you have these alphabet tips for life in the zone, which I think is great. When I met you, gratitude was G for gratitude, which I thought was lovely. Tell us more about that. What is that about?
Yes, well, you're referring to my blog that is attached to my website. And for what I just talked about, the fact that, you know, I set out to achieve something that was fairly improbable for me in the position I was in. I had very high expectations, very high standards for myself. I, you know, wanted to make sure that I got my PhD from a highly rated university. All these things were important to me. And, you know, I dealt with a lot of people who were wonderful and supportive, but you know, really only takes one naysayer in there to sort of make you start wondering. So what I wanted to do was I wanted to share with people the experiences that I've had in hopes that maybe I could inspire them to go after their own dream. And you refer to the alphabet. I just decided to organize it in a way where I thought it would be familiar to people and where they could jump in and open it up at any point. And also the idea of, I wrote G is for gratitude. That's a value that I find incredibly important. It's one of the guiding values in my own life. And I found that it's you know, something that's so helpful. And I know that's one that you share. And so I just started off like that. And so I wrote G is for gratitude, A is for action. I will say, you know, it's really in its early stages. And so I don't have a lot of posts yet, but I am working on it.
I think it's brilliant. You know, I think it's a life of gratitude is really, I think, very fulfilling. If you start your day by being grateful for what's around you, everything else is just, you know, a blessing.
That's one of the things that I advocate to clients, is that they have a gratitude journal, and that they make the time every day to mark down in it at least 5 things that they are grateful for in the day. And it's incredible how much we can take for granted unless we really draw attention to it and force ourselves to articulate it. And you can talk about it, and that's a good thing to do too. But writing it down is a wonderful treat, because it means that you can look back and see what are all the things that I was grateful for, you know, a month ago, 2 months ago, 3 months ago.
Now, we've had a lot of lovely discussion. Help me bring it back to money and wealth. And there's success. Money is one of the definitions of success. And wealth, of course, it's a broader perspective of that. So in terms of someone trying to fulfill their goals and money, how in my show is about money, so I want to kind of bring to our audience one of the relationship between coaching for success and money.
Yes. Well, as we talked about, money can be a goal for somebody, but what I find is that people who are really committed to making money as one of their goals are those people who are really in touch with what their values are and what money can do for them in a positive way. It tends to be people who realize that money can grant you a certain level of freedom and a certain level of power, and that they can then use that to make the world a better place. And I know that that's something that you do. I know that you're focused on writing your books for children. I know you're working on the alphabet of values that's going to be coming up. And you know, this is just a sense of that you have achieved a certain point in your life where you can take what you have and you can help to spread it around in ways that are meaningful to you and that also make other people's lives better. So that's where money and success really work hand in hand in a very meaningful and satisfying way, rather than simply amassing it because if you have a lot, somebody will think more highly of you, or you know what the things are that it can buy.
Sure, absolutely, and I totally agree with that. I think it's a great way to describe it. I mean, people say that money is the root of all evil, but truly it says the love of money is the root of all evil.
Yes.
It really can't it's hard to have a good life in terms of giving and helping the world be a better place without money. Without money, it's hard you can't eat. Without money, you can't sustain yourself.
Absolutely. If you're having trouble meeting your basic needs, it's very, very difficult to move beyond that. So I think, yeah, it does. It opens up a world of possibilities, and it's wonderful to see what people can do with those possibilities,
Sure.
the kinds of things that they can bring to the world.
Absolutely. It's just a means to get to what you want to accomplish. Now, how does money come in the equation of being phenomenal? From successful to phenomenal, I think.
Well, I think you would be my role model there. It's all about loving what you do. It's about rejoicing every day in the what's ahead of you, what you're capable of, and what you're going to do. You know, I recently saw. I went to Penn. And the founder of Penn was Benjamin Franklin. So Benjamin Franklin has a special place in my heart. And he was very well known for being incredibly organized. And he had a day planner. Actually, the Franklin planner comes from Benjamin Franklin. But what I was fascinated by was on a printed page of his day planner, he would have all the hours of the day marked off. And he would have it bracketed for, you know, this is set aside for dining, this is set aside for going over my accounts, this is set aside for reading, for conversation. But he always started the day with a question and ended the day with a question, the same question. He started the day with the question, what good will I do today? And he ended the day with the question, what good have I done today?
Oh, beautiful.
That to me is phenomenal.
Yes, that is phenomenal, and you are indeed phenomenal. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure having you at my show.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure to be here.
And thank you, our guest, for watching us today. My guest is R.C. Glen, President and co-founder of iGoals Coaching. And thanks for watching. Until next time, I'm Nannete Nocon.
Thanks for tuning in to today's show. If you have any questions for It's About Money, please email Nannete at nnocon@aol.com. This program was produced through Penfield Community Television in Penfield, New York.